we continue, I do just want to acknowledge that Cairnmillar is founded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. We do pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge their deep, enduring connection to land, waters, and community. We acknowledge the richness and value of their accumulated cultural knowledge spanning vast expanses of time, and extend this respect to all Indigenous peoples of this continent and all adjacent lands, as well as to any First Nations people who come across the material below. So today we're really going to give you a chance to hear a little bit more about the Bachelor of Psychology Honours course, and specifically what makes it different at Cairnmillar. You'll have a chance to hear from both Dr. Brooker as well as Genevieve about how the course is laid out across the units that you might be studying, some of the certain thesis or research areas that you might be able to engage in, as well as later on a bit more information about the general student experience and student support that's available at Cairnmillar. We'll wrap up with a few comments around how to apply and receiving application support, as well as responding to a few questions that each of you raised when you first registered for this session. So just to get started, why Cairnmillar, and a little bit more about Cairnmillar Institute. So we are a small, very bespoke school located in Hawthorn East, but we've been pioneering psychology and counselling in Australia since 1961. We have flexible study options across all of our courses with options for students to study either fully online, fully on campus, or a hybrid mode, as well as both part-time and full-time availability options for students. You do have the chance to learn from experts and practitioners because this has really been our expertise area since we were first founded. And we consistently receive above national average ratings across our student experience surveys and feedback. We do also offer tailored support services, whether that's for study, research, or additional support in then finding some post-graduate career options, as well as professional development and lifelong learning that we offer through either short courses, micro-credentials, as well as single subjects. We are also a not-for-profit, so donations and tuition fees from students are given back to the community, whether that's through research, through clinical practice, or otherwise. And we really adopt this triple helix approach where we combine training, research, and clinical practice to ensure that the educational experiences that we can provide to students are the best that they can be.
CBT-based therapy. You have to do placement hours, you have to do equivalent of some sort of research component within a 2-year course, or those people vary up in how that's delivered. So all courses under APAC do have a certain minimum standards and certain aspects that are similar. So I think it should be emphasized. And in terms of what makes this course different, we think that we've got a wider breadth of coursework subjects than a lot of MPsych clinical programs do. We do include a unit that's primarily on third wave therapies. We also have a unit that's on psychodynamic therapies as well, short-term psychodynamic therapy, that's in the second year. And students give that great feedback. They really do like that that unit. Most lecturers are practitioners and use real-life case studies in the classroom and have knowledge of contemporary practice. We've got a robust placement program. We've got clinics, so a lot of students will go through our own clinics, although not all. And so those clinics are a little bit different to other places that have clinics. Like a lot of places will have purely student clinics, whereas our clinics you work alongside registered practitioners as well. So that's a little bit of a different feel to those placements. We've got clinics at our main campus in Hawthorn East, also at Dandenong, North Melbourne, and Mingaree as well. Finally, probably one of the things that's a little bit different is that probably parking's a little bit easier at Cairnmillar as well, as opposed to some of the university-based placements, based courses. I mean, I used to work at Deakin, and I've certainly experienced as a staff member driving around for 20 minutes trying to find a park around there, or getting stuck in a traffic jam getting out of the university at the start of semester. So it can be a little bit easier from that point of view, and we are also very accessible by public transport as well. There's a train station 10 minutes down, well, 5 to 10 minute walk from campus as well. We're not far from the freeway as well. Right. So we had a number of questions about selection. So what do you need? So you apply directly. You need to have a fourth year WAM above 75. In practice, that tends to be a little bit higher, around 78 in 2023. You obviously want to do well in your, so we have a two-stage process where you do your written application, then you have an interview. So obviously you want to do well in the interview as well. When you're applying, you need to put in your academic transcripts, both fourth year and undergraduate. You need your resume as well, proof of identity and citizenship status, which obviously can be the same document. We don't specifically have, and this was a question that was on the from registrants, we don't differentiate in terms of looking at selection for the international and domestic students. It's all going into the same pool. And our international fees, and they're a little bit higher, but they're not massively higher than our domestic fees, as can be the case elsewhere. Obviously, if you are an international student, there is more general English language requirements that are enforced by APRA, so you do need to meet those, and that will be the same across every APAC accredited course. And if you've got questions about admissions, then you can reach out to the applications email there or check the course pages on our website. So to give a little bit more information about the selection process, so there's a short listing of written applications. So that involves your academic record, both fourth year and undergraduate as well. You also need to mention previous work experience and training, and you will need some relevant work, be it paid or volunteer work. So that can be in a variety of different avenues. Paid jobs, people tend to be in places like, they might be in, a lot of people obviously do things like ABA work. There's people who do work in drug and alcohol settings where fourth year graduates might end up. Mental health support workers is another common paid experience, or working with trauma, people who've survived trauma. In terms of volunteer experience, common ones are things, like Lifeline or being on the phones at a support organization like ARCVIC or ADVIC, running a support group through those organizations, or the Eating Disorders Foundation or similar. All sorts of relevant work. You will need one academic and one professional referee report. You'll need to put in your personal statement, and that goes into the written application. Now it goes through a shortlisting procedure, and then you'll have an interview, and obviously that will also play into your final selection as well. Excellent. All right. And then there were questions about, what do I put in my personal statement? Essentially in your personal statement, really, look, there's no magic formula to your personal statement. It's more about, well, why do you want to do the course? Why do you want to do the course at Ken Miller particularly? Why do you think that you'll be good for the course? Anything you want to highlight that perhaps isn't as obvious in your CV? And probably to an extent, I would avoid just reiterating in your different words your CV, because I do read the CV, so there's no point writing a CV twice. So that's the kind of stuff that you put in the personal statement. But all four of those things are important for selection. So people are like, well, which part is it all about, one or the other? It's all taken into account. So your marks, your previous experience, your referee reports, and your personal statement all play into that. All right. Now, there were questions about, what, I'm trying to find the exact question. Where is it? Well, essentially the question, workload and schedule. What are the usual days and times on site was one of the questions. Will I be able to work alongside my study was another one. So this is an example of the course structure for so the first 2 years of the D-Psych is exactly the same as the M-Psych. So it's a common first 2 years. And so this applies to both of them. Obviously, these timetable days are subject to confirmation, but this has been the way it's been for at least the last 3 years, probably longer, but the last 3 years have been at Cam Miller. So it's probably going to stay fairly similar to this, but obviously the days could change. But so typically what happens is in the first year, you have your first semester, you particularly have more coursework. So you've got in your first semester, you've got coursework on Thursdays and Fridays. So that coursework, particularly in the first semester, is the things that we really want you to get early before you get onto placement. So you've got a CBT-based unit where you learn about CBT, do role plays, that kind of thing, transdiagnostic model of CBT. You've got psych assessment stuff. So that's where you learn about testing. So you learn about structured tests like the WISC and the WIAT, personality-based inventories like the PAI, that kind of thing. You've got an practice and ethics unit, because obviously you need practice and ethics before you go on placement. And then you start research as well. So you've got a research unit that goes all the way through. So you're doing a research component, which is a minor thesis, 5,000 to 8,000 words. That goes all the way through, but you start in first semester. There's only a few classes for that in first semester. So the research project starts, and then we also have workshops, what we call placement ready workshops. So that we've just introduced that this year and it's gone quite well. And those are things that will help you get ready for placement throughout semester. So primarily coursework Thursday and Friday, research project, and that's kind of it for first semester. Second semester, then you do less coursework. So you've got a child and adolescent unit because a lot of people will end up in their first placement and potentially in a school or a setting where you'll see children and adolescents. So it's important to have knowledge and experience around that. You get a bit more research stuff, research methods. And then you start your, in sort of, I think it was July was our first start date for actually going on to placement this year. So that was either at clinics or in schools. And so then you've got placement from second semester, basically 2 days a week for the rest of the course. And the placement doesn't necessarily stick to semester time. So you don't want to be, planning to take a 3-month holiday before you get in. That will be difficult because your placement, if you're at a school, for example, the placement will run up until the end of school, which might be, the 20th of December or whenever schools finish at the moment. And then second year, again, you've got, stick there. So you've got coursework. So in first semester, second year, you've got a unit called interpersonal processes, which is basically third wave kind of therapy stuff, EMDR, ACT, schema therapy is discussed in there as well. And a unit on adult psychopathology and intervention as well. You continue research, continue another placements. There's been another setting. And then second semester, you've got 2 coursework units, which is health, psychology, and psychodynamic therapy. And you've got, again, another placement, which is in a third setting. And you've hopefully are fairly advanced in your research project. You can finish it off at this point. Now, I know I've been talking for a bit. Deb, did you have anything that you wanted to add at this point about, obviously you're in that second semester, how you thoughts or anything you want to say, really?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Rich. Hi, everyone. It's great to be a part of this evening. I'm currently, as Rich said, in semester 2 of the program and loving every bit of it, and so grateful to be here We have an incredible cohort of students, and I'm so delighted to be a part of this team. As Rich said, we've got incredible lecturers who are experts in their own right, who have firsthand experience working with clients, and many of them are researchers themselves. And my placement has been fantastic. I think I'm in week 8 or 9 of my placement at Sykes in Schools, which is an organisation that places some of the students into schools, and I'm working at a public school, and really learning on the job under supervision, which I believe is the best way to develop psych skills, and really well supported. So that's what I'll drop in here right now.
Excellent. All right, well, and feel free to interrupt me if you've got anything to add in as well. I'm sorry to put you on the spot there. All right, and some students will also want to do the DPsych. So the DPsych is a 4-year degree, so it's got another couple of years on the end. And I'll talk a little bit about why you might want to do the DPsych a bit later on. But essentially, what you get in those extra 2 years is a much bigger thesis. So rather than 5,000 to 8,000 words, it's around 40,000 words, 40 to 60,000 words. So it typically is like 3 studies as opposed to a single study in the masters. And that continues throughout the extra 2 years. You're also doing 2 extra placements as well. So rather than doing 1,000 hours with 400 hours contact hours, you're doing 1,500 with 600 hours. And there's 1 extra unit as well, advanced diagnostics and interventions for complex presentations. That varies as to whether it's in 3rd or 4th year. It runs every 2 years, that unit. And that's an extra unit that you do as well. And so that's the DPsych program. But you can, if you choose to start in the masters, you can switch, because it's a common first 2 years, you can switch into the DPsych as long as you're discussing that with your supervisor. You don't just want to launch into it out of nowhere. At the end of the 2nd year, there is a process to get between the two where you basically just have to present and demonstrate that you've got a research program mapped out to take your master's to a doctorate level, as well as obviously have been doing well enough in everything that you're doing to demonstrate that that's going to be a good idea to do 2 more years of placement and that kind of thing as well. All right, so how are we going for time? All right, so as I noted, so the Masters has a supervised placement. So first semester you get introductory workshops, then you get either an internal placement or equivalent external placement. So Deb mentioned that she's at Sykes in Schools, so she's at a public school, whereas other students might be at the one of the Ken Miller clinics, because we've got multiple ones. And then in year 2, you get 2 additional placements. There's a range of experiences. So we do look for, like, when we're mapping out everyone's placement path, you have to have a diversity of experiences across the lifespan and across sort of the level of complexity with clients as well. So you're not just going into a Ken Miller clinic and then doing a private clinic with similar clients and then doing some other private clinic with similar clients. It is a variety of different places. We've got a lot of students at Monash Health in particular, or Western Health. We've got a number of students there. You might end up at a Headspace or a public mental health or a university counselling service or a school and community setting, private practice, forensic settings. So there's some placements that we have particular relationships with. There's others that just open themselves up to the sector more generally. And we do have a variety of links, and everyone knows, everyone gets a good variety of experiences and gets that worked out for them as you go through. Right, and in terms of research, so we did have a few questions about research. I'll just try and find if I can find those questions. But yes, you know, essentially, sorry, I can't find the specific question. It's escaping me at the moment, but people did ask what sort of research will they end up doing in the master's. So typically a master's thesis, it is a minor thesis, so it's 5,000 to 8,000 words in the form of a journal article. And the idea is that we're hoping to encourage people to do journal-ready research that they might want to submit if it's novel and good enough at the end of the program. We have a variety of different projects that are available. This varies every year depending on supervisors' availability and interests, and includes things like eating disorders. I do a lot of work in hoarding disorders, people who do work on parenting, borderline personality disorder. Pete Norton he coordinates a PhD as Associate Dean of Research and teaches the ethics unit, and he's developed a transdiagnostic form of CBT, so he does a lot of work in that. We've got work on clinician attitudes to treatment using, like, for example, stressing clinicians, clinicians using telehealth, clinicians' view of the field, mindfulness work with autism spectrum disorders, we've got work in refugee communities, work in racial microaggressions, stress. Steve Trawley, who runs our research units, does a lot of work in lived experience of diabetes and using like monitoring, sort of I can't remember the term, but the monitoring pumps that you wear all the time. And so there's just a variety of different things. So it's really just sort of fitting with the supervisor in terms of finding an area that fits you and interests the supervisor as well. Some supervisors have specific projects, others are more willing to kind of work and come up with something together. And so there's research units with some sort of research methody kind of stuff, and then there's also a lot of that research is just done through individual research supervision, and that's due in October in the second year of the course. Excellent. So I saw a note in the chat. Did you want to talk about your experience of doing placements and research, Deb?
Thanks a lot, Rich. Perhaps I'll start with the research. So I'm very excited to be a part of a research program. So I'm the student researcher, but I'm working alongside, I think it could be 6 or 7 co-researchers. And my supervisor had, prior to me coming on board, had teed up a research project with an external community based organization where they are running amazing pain programs to support adults who are experiencing chronic pain. And this partnership has offered the opportunity for us to support the organization to assess the feasibility of their study, and from a qualitative perspective, but also looking at quantitative outcomes and measuring their pain outcomes on various scales, like 5 scales. It's really exciting data and a holistic approach to measuring pain and well-being in adults. So I'm really excited about that project. And that's been a delight over the last a few months being a part of that, and that will continue on into next year when my final thesis is due. And as for placement, as I mentioned before, it was about my placement experience. That's right. Yes. So as for placements, as I mentioned before, I'm working with a public school and with the organisation Psychs in Schools. And just sort of like a little bit of personal disclosure before the placement, I thought, oh my goodness, I've done quite a bit of coursework so far, and I haven't yet done placement, and I was feeling pretty apprehensive and nervous about how I might be a real psych in a setting with real clients, and I was pretty nervous beforehand. But I turned up on my first day and was warmly welcomed by the school who were just delighted to have as a resource, a provisional psych resource on campus to support them. And I felt so welcomed, and I realized that the work is so important, and the placement opportunity, the nerves that I originally had dissipated over the first days when I realized that whilst I'm a beginner psych, because I'm a prov psych, I also have some skills, and rapport building is one of those skills that I'm sure a lot of us have. And that goes a long way in treatment with our clients. So I'm building my skills every day under the support of supervision, individual and group supervision. And I've learned to just sort of throw myself into the deep end and do the best I can so that I can support people and their well-being.
Thanks so much, Deb. That's really lovely feedback and insight. And I might pass it back to Rich to talk a little bit more about the doctor program now.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you for that. Sorry, I was also typing into the Q&A, so I was a little bit distracted. So the D-Psych, I mentioned the D-Psych. So the first 2 years, as I said, are identical to the M-Psych. The last 2 years involve additional placements, coursework, and research particularly. And that leads to a big thesis. There is a scholarship for the final 2 years. So it's not one with a stipend, but it covers 50% of your course costs. So it does take down the overall fee quite substantially. When you do the D-Psych, you can actually register after the first 2 years, presuming you've done everything in those first 2 years and you've done a study to essentially a master's equivalent, you can register. So you can actually work towards getting your registrar program. And so like we had a student who just finished, was it this year, I think? Yes, it was earlier this year, a student I was supervising who the instant they graduated got their registrar as well, because they'd already done all their registrar hours. So they didn't have to wait and they just got it straight away. And the reason that you might want to do a doctorate, besides the fact that you are more keen on research, and it does give you the for what it's worth, the ability to use the professional title doctor in your practice, but it does also, if you're interested in sort of working in, you might want to work in clinical roles, but you might want to have flexibility to work in a place that has a bit more sort of research or teaching or that kind of thing. You might want to do some part-time work at a Can Miller or at some other setting that might be a bit more research oriented, like like a Origin might be, for example. Then it opens your capacity to do that as well. Excellent. So if we can go to the next one. Yep. So I did mention that we also have a PhD. So the PhD, as I said, is it's a little bit confusing because some universities have a thing called a PhD clinical, which is essentially like a master's PhD program. So it's probably most similar to our doctorate, whereas our PhD is, and most everywhere also has a PhD, which is not a PhD clinical, and that doesn't have clinical work. And so this PhD doesn't have clinical work in it. So when you get out, you haven't done the placement, but what you have done is a really big thesis, so 60 to 80,000 words or more. And so that is particularly for people who want to do research work. Or it might be that you've already got registered and you have a passion project that you want to actually investigate under supervision with a mentor and with capacity to have people help you along with that as well. And obviously you get to call yourself doctor at the end of that as well. Or if you've been working as a clinician, then you might want to change and go and work more in a research setting. It gives you capacity as well with that. And so, yes, so we have a PhD program that's run by Professor Peter Norton, but obviously you can be supervised by lots of different people within the faculty depending on your area. All right, so this is student support, so I might turn back to...
Thank you. So hopefully that I know that's been a wealth of information and maybe a little bit of information overload in terms of the different course options and what distinguishes each course from one another. But what I wanted to also address is some of the benefits of just being a student in general at Cairnmillar. And Deb, feel free to chime in if you wanted to add anything as well. So we really pride ourselves here at Cairnmillar in making sure that we do support our students across all facets of their experience. So a number of things that we do offer are, for anyone here today who would be an international student, there are tailored social activities, dedicated workshops, and other specific study and living advice that we can offer to international students to accommodate and acknowledge some of the nuances that they experience. We also do have a number of different academic support resources, including one-on-one learning advice, a number of ongoing academic skills sessions, and other study strategies and tips that are delivered through workshops or presentations. And then lastly, we do also offer a number of different flexible study modifications for students who do have either ongoing or temporary accessibility needs, as well as those students who may experience, special circumstances or other personal significant events that could occur throughout the duration of their studies. So we really make sure to kind of acknowledge those individual experiences that students have and to make adjustments and accommodations wherever we can to make sure that everyone does have the support they need to succeed. So I also just wanted to briefly speak to the tuition fees and funding, and I'll make a few comments first and then pass it back to Rich. So we have updated our fees for 2025. These have been published now on our website, so you can find more information about each of the specific course fees as well by visiting those pages. But we do have a number of different ways to pay for your tuition fees as well. So for domestic students, you can allocate your tuition fees to your fee help account as part of your study loan. There are also a number of different external subsidies or scholarships that students may be able to find themselves, whether that's through their current employment or other foundations in and around Australia that do support particularly study within mental health. As well as just upfront and direct. So students who would just like to pay for their fees directly are obviously also able to do that. Rich did speak briefly to an internal scholarship that we do have that's available for the DPsych program, and I'll pass it back to him to speak a little bit further around those.
Sorry, I was just back to the Q&A box. Yes, so as I said, so we've got a scholarship for 50% of the course fees for the DPsych third and fourth year. So that means an indicative total fee of 116,000. So it's around 30 grand equivalent off there. You can see the difference as well between the domestic and the international rates there as well. So it's not hugely different for the MPsych. It is more for the PhD though. But the PhD domestic is only 28,000 for the 4 years or 3 years or the 6 years part-time. And that's because the government subsidizes PhD work essentially. So that's the difference there. There was a question about other scholarships for international students. There aren't, I don't believe, although I'm not, to be honest, I'd need to get back to anyone if they're interested about whether the Coral Brown is only for domestic, but I think that would be fine for international as well. Yeah. So, and then, yeah, so we've got the normal ways to assist with that through fee help and things like that. Did you want me to add anything to that, Mung, or is that okay?
No, that's okay. Again, if anyone does have questions about specific fees or some of the subsidy options, you're always welcome to reach out to our applications team, either via email or by booking an individual admissions consultation, which again can be done on our website. But I just wanted to, again, acknowledging that there's been a lot of information shared today, I just wanted to recap a few key things. So applications are open until that should say throughout the rest of this year. And ongoing offers, are already being made from this point onwards. So we have started to release a number of different interview invitations, particularly for those strong candidates. And we would really encourage all applicants to get in early so that they have that maximal consideration possible. As mentioned, there is fee help available to eligible domestic students. And for some of our courses, there are also flexible online on campus as well as part-time arrangements available. So if you are interested in other course offerings, do have a look on our course pages about the different options available to you for study. Again, as we spoke to at the very beginning of today's presentation, this very much is a pathway to that APRA registration. And we really commit at Care Miller to making sure that there are options available to students from the very beginning of that registration journey right up until the end. So with that being said, I'm just gonna hand it back to Rich and Deb to see if there were any other questions that came through in the chat that they wanted to speak to a little bit further. If you do have any questions that we haven't been able to get to today, feel free to pop them into the Q&A. We do have a few moments still to tackle some questions, but as we mentioned as well, if there's anything that we don't get to, feel free to reach out via email. Otherwise, we'll make sure to keep a transcript of the Q&A so that we can follow up to any people who didn't get their questions answered as well. But for now, I'll hand it back to Rich and Deb to see if there's anything they wanted to address.
Yeah, so there was a question about how much can you work. We don't recommend that people work more than a day a week. You've seen the course schedule. So if you can imagine that most of the course you're on at placement at least 2 days a week, then you've got classes for at least a day a week, and then you've got research assignments, homework, reading, etc., which is probably at least another day, if not more. And so you can see that's already 4+ days of your week gone. So if you're working another day, then, so maybe it's 4.5 days, 4 to 4.5 days. If you're working a day, that gets you 5.5 days. If you're working 3 days a week, that's taking you to probably 8 days of your week, and you're in deep trouble. So, and we do see it from like as a course convener, I do definitely see when I can see when people are working too much. Essentially, that's when people are struggling with their work or falling behind, or things often are going wrong, and that's often a symptom of people just working too much. So that's for any full-time course. Like if you're planning on doing a clinical master's here or elsewhere, you've just got to really be prepared that they're all very big and very busy times. So you got to be prepared that you're not going to be doing that much work, and and I guess it is a financial imposition, and I think you've got to be realistic, and I've got to be realistic about that. So you do need to plan accordingly, however that might be, or be prepared for that as well. Yeah. So I don't know if Deb want to add anything to that.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich. 100% to attest to what Rich said. I'm a student in my close to finishing the first year, and I can say that to be really realistic around the hours that you are working, as Rich mentioned, the workload is high due to the coursework as well as the thesis. And there are many steps in the thesis, as well as the placement, as well as making sure you look after yourself, and that self-care that's really important to support you to be a great clinician and to show up for your clients. So all of that takes time, and not just sort of time as in minutes time, but also just the space and time to be able to reflect and digest what happens in placements, as well as just diving deep into a thesis and learning new materials. This all sort of takes time and space. And so I think that, as Rich said, it's important to be realistic and also to plan ahead for an opportunity like this.
Yeah.
So we do have a number of questions coming through to the Q&A. We've been kind of typing out some responses to those, but Rich or Deb, if you did want to speak to any of those just live, feel free to do so as well.
Yeah. So, well, I was just answering the one about course fees. So there was one around why, I mean, yes, it is quite an expensive course to do. I don't think there's any sugarcoating that. You look at the numbers, they look quite scary, although it's perhaps less scary when fee help is involved. But yes, the reason that we don't, I mean, the reason it looks so high, particularly compared to undergraduate, is that we don't have access to what's called Commonwealth supported places because they're available only to university providers. We're a not-for-profit health charity. So we don't have access to those subsidized placements, subsidized places. But it also is a not-for-profit. I mean, it's worth mentioning that all that money goes directly back into running the institute, paying staff, paying counsellors in the clinics, paying for your teaching, etc. So there's no one profiting from this. It all goes back into costs and running the institute. It's also probably worth noting that some courses will have Commonwealth supported places, and obviously, you know, they'll be very appealing if you get one of those. But most places, like I know, for example, Swinburne, because my partner works at Swinburne, only half of their places are Commonwealth supported. The other half would be full fee. And ICU is equally around half the places are Commonwealth supported. So our full fee would be probably not too dissimilar to fees if you're not in the Commonwealth supported places in those institutes as well. But it just looks high, particularly compared to a undergraduate supported program, which probably most people are in. Can you claim credit for courses research previously undertaken? That really depends on what the course or research is. So when you get in, you can apply for RPL, but it would just depend on the nature of that. Like, is that RPL from an accredited program? What is the nature of that? But we do have processes for RPL, and occasionally we get people transferring in from other institutes, and that's probably the time people most qualify for RPL. How many students are accepted into the DPsych program? All right, so in total, and this was a question down on the form as well. So in total, we're aiming to take 30 places. Those 30 places is a mix of DPsych and MPsych. Because you do a common first 2 years anyway, it sort of goes into the same pool for that reason. So we don't specifically cap the relative proportion of DPsychs and MPsychs. That's really dependent on student preference. It's not necessarily any more competitive to get into the DPsych because you've still got to be have good marks, have good experience, etc. So it's basically the same. We just want to be particularly aware that, you know, doing a 60 to 80,000 word thesis isn't going to be the worst mistake you ever made. So we do scrutinize your researchability a bit more if you're applying for the DPsych. For academic entry, does it only assess fourth year or the whole undergrad? So both are taken into account in selection, but fourth year is the one with the mandated minimum, but we do also look at your undergrad when we're looking at your application as well. So you do need to put both of those in. And so that's all the open questions.
Yeah, so thanks, Rich. I know that was, again, a bit of an onslaught of information. We do have another couple of minutes, so if there was anything else that you wanted to pop in the Q&As, feel free to do so, and we'll address them live for the rest of the session. Again, reiterating that if you feel like you would benefit from some additional support, you're always welcome to book a one-on-one admissions consultation with our team, which you can do via the booking calendar on our website, or you're welcome to send through an email as well to the applications inbox, and we'll make sure to follow up with any outstanding inquiries that you have. But as I mentioned, we do still have another couple of minutes, so Rich, Deb, and I will still be here for a little, just in case any other Q&As come through. But otherwise, I want to thank you all again for your attendance today. We really hope to see your applications come through in the coming days or weeks, but don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything else we can do to support. We'll hang around for a little bit, as mentioned, so feel free to continue using the Q&A if you need. But otherwise, thanks again for attending.
Excellent. Thanks all. Sorry, I was distracted by the Q&A, but thank you everyone for attending if you're still here.
The Q&A's got lots of messages that are saying thanks for that was informative and helpful. That's great.
Excellent. Did you want to answer that question about the applications, Ming?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I actually was in the middle of clicking the wrong button. Apologies. So there was a question coming through about what to reference in terms of your highest qualification. So if you are enrolled in a current course that you're anticipating to complete at the end of this year, you can indicate that as your highest, even though it's not technically attained, given that we are making conditional offers already. And your current WAM would just be calculated on any units that you've already completed. So if you then are deemed eligible for entry, it would just be a conditional offer, conditional upon completing the course that you've indicated.
Excellent. All right, so will there be no more interview offers if places are all filled before the October deadline? No, so I mean, essentially the way it works is, I mean, we are taking offers on taking interviews on a rolling basis until October, and so we will be making some early offers. But with the procedure we have, because I've been doing it for so many years, we know approximately the level that we need in terms of screening applicants, in terms of where the cutoffs will be. So the cutoffs are pretty well defined. And so we will continue to have interviews and offers through to that deadline. So, and you know, if we end up with a couple more places than we anticipated, that's fine. We'll cover that. That'll be fine. In terms of whether fourth year or all years are considered, so yeah, so the answer to that was, so it's all considered, but fourth year is what you need for your WAM minimum. So you need 75 in your fourth year WAM, or 75 to date, and then the offer will be made conditionally. Excellent.
Did we answer the Q&A that came in with said will there be no more interview offers if places are all filled before the October deadline?
Yeah, I think I hopefully just answered that.
Sorry, I was trying to read all the Q&As to see if something was outstanding. Sorry.
Yeah, no, all good, all good. Excellent. All right, I can't see the list of attendees. Is people? Oh, here we still go. In terms of working referees, what would you be more? So in terms of working referees, I'd want the one, if it was, I personally think you'd probably preference the one who knows your work best. Often if you go for the more senior person who doesn't directly work with you, then, you know, they probably won't give you the most glowing reference because they don't know you too well. So that, you know, yes, they look esteemed because they might be the manager or whatever, but often they'll be like, I know this person moderately and they moderately support their application and don't have a lot to say, whereas someone who actually works with you is far more likely to give you a good reference because they actually know your work much better, and they're probably more likely to write more in terms of the qualitative feedback that's in those forms as well. So I would go with the person who knows your work and can speak to your work rather than the person who, you know, on paper looks more senior. Structure of the interview. So there's no role play, so it's all online. And typically at the moment, although we're still discussing some alterations to this, but at the moment it's a two-person panel, and it's essentially questions. Some of those questions might be vignette oriented, but it's not like a role play. So we might ask, what would you do in this situation? But we're not saying, now imagine you are and act as if you are. So we're not doing role plays in that sense. But they're all online. Have a WAM in the low 90s, but no work or volunteer experience. Look, I mean, to be honest, if you've got no work experience, then look, it's hard to say whether it's worth applying. I mean, I need to look at your actual application, but we do have people every year who have great marks but don't get an interview because they don't have any experience. So yeah, it will make it quite hard, but that will potentially vary depending on where you're applying to. Like other places might not have the same selection criteria, so they might not look at experience as much as we do. But I would think, I mean, one of the reasons for that, beyond wanting to know that you're good at it, is from your referees and all that. But we also don't want to know that you know what you're in for, right? So you might, particularly an undergraduate degree, depending on where you are, some degrees have some counselling courses within them, but then there's other degrees that are very science oriented, so you might not actually like it when you get through to it. So we really want to know that you've had some kind of experience and know that it's really what you want to do, because it is a really hard course when you get in, so you want to know what you're in for, right? And I think Deb would attest to that. It's not an easy course, and if you're not 100% knowledgeable or ready to go, then it might be a mistake. So that's another reason.
So we do have one more question that's just come through, and I note that we've now hit our time. So we'll just address this for now. If you do have anything else that comes through, please feel free to pop it in the chat, shoot us an email, or book a consultation as mentioned. But I'll let Rich answer this last question for now, before we wrap
up. Is it worth applying with experience in healthcare, even if not counselling specifically? It's a little bit hard to know without knowing what you mean by healthcare, but I would say, look, I mean, as long as it's, I mean, it probably is. I mean, it depends how relevant it is. Like, is it assessment work? Is it work where you're working with clients? You might be working in a healthcare setting where you're working with distressed people, or doing face-to-face kind of work. I mean, a lot of healthcare roles involve some kind of aspect of face-to-face or client work, regardless of what they do. And I mean, obviously, even like you imagine jobs like GPs and things like that. I mean, they do a lot of counselling-oriented work, and I'm obviously not suggesting you're a GP, but a lot of roles will have some kind of client experience, so there might be, so it might be relevant. So it really just depends on what the nature of the healthcare work is. I mean, obviously, if it's testing swabs in a lab, that's probably not relevant. But if it's working with people, then that's probably somewhat relevant.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Rich, and thanks, Deb, again for your time, and for all of you for your time and your questions. We really do hope to see you at Cairnmillar, or to see your application come through soon. But as mentioned a number of times, if you do have any questions or want further information, you can always contact our applications team or book an individual consultation on our calendar on the website. I'll pass it back to Deb and Rich if they have any last comments, but otherwise, thanks again, folks, and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, not too much else to add, but look forward to getting applications and meeting some of you in the interviews and then in the course. And also thanks so much to Deb for coming from as just a current student, volunteering a time to come along tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure. And I look forward to meeting the new students next year. And shoot for the stars, guys. Try your best, and it's an absolutely fantastic place to do your studies.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. And thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.